Okay, in this drawing we're going to be focusing on this small bottle, trying to replicate this bottle. Now I'm going to be drawing in isometric projection, which means I'm going to be using sort of vertical lines going from the bottom of the page at 90 degrees up there, okay, and doing two planes coming off, so I suppose the X plane and the Z plane there to show depth at 30 degrees from that vertical line that we're drawing up there, okay. You can also do two-point perspective and follow the same sort of construction methods that I'm doing for this bottle, but obviously you'd have to factor in the foreshortening aspects that occur when you are doing a two-point perspective and using vanishing points. So we're going to make a start with this, and I'm going to start with my kind of free lines as I normally do. You'll notice I'll turn the paper around as I'm drawing, but we're going to draw a vertical plane, so I'm ghosting the line like this to get myself into the habit of drawing the lines. I'm a bit rusty, and I'll draw hopefully a line that is fairly straight. I'm then going to do two lines going across at opposite angles to each other around about 30 degrees from that point like this. So there we go, 1 and 2, there's my two lines there, okay. And what I've done is I've created three lines, 1, 2 and 3 for that kind of base shape to start myself off with this kind of slightly rounded cuboid shape. Now the next thing I'm going to do is think about proportion. So this first line, the height of this first line here will dictate the whole size of the shape as I'm going forward. So I'm going to start my drawing. It's going to say it's going to go up to about there, okay. So I'm going to draw two lines coming off there to complete my kind of first cuboid. Here we go, 1 and the opposite way, 2, like this, okay. And then this is going to dictate my height. So for that height and that width, we're looking, it's probably about maybe one and a bit in terms of height to the width there. So we're going to go to that point there, and I'm going to draw my line down, okay. So I'm looking at this to try and get the proportions right. You can always tweak these things as you go along, but we're going to go with that, okay. So at that point there, what I can do is draw a line across like this that's parallel to the bottom like that, and mark that point. And if I've done it correctly, it should be around about the same point on the other side. That doesn't look quite correct. I think it's because this is maybe a little bit offline. There we go, let's take that up a little bit there, and then we should have this point coming across on the other side like this, okay, going up. Okay, so we've got two lines going up and our central point there for the front of the cuboid, okay. Now I'm going to just complete this cube like this, so we're going to go like that, and we're going to take another line going across like that, okay, to the other point. Now what we should find obviously is that these lines and these lines are kind of meeting up with each other to give myself a centre point. I could put a centre line through like this as well to kind of work out where the centre of that cuboid is. Now looking at the shape, we can see if we look at this this side here, it's ever so slightly rounded, it's just bulging out a little bit from the side. So what we're going to do is from these centre points here, here, here and here, you noticed I divided this up to find those centre points from the centre there. I'm going to put a little mark out just coming out from each side like this. So following that same point like that and trying to keep this in. And what I'm going to do is draw my curved section in there. So I'm going to do a curve coming round like that, coming round like this. Notice I'm starting and finishing at the end points like that. I'm going to do one to this side as well. And then finally one going round like this, okay. Now what we've got is we've got that rounded kind of rectangle shape that's created, and this can be replicated down the bottom as well. So what I'm going to do is draw some lines down like this, okay, that are going down from the top to the bottom. Again, we're trying to keep this parallel to the other lines on this particular plane, okay. And then that same distance bulge coming out, I'm going to draw that line down, which should come to about here, which will mean the bulge will be consistent from the top to the bottom. Notice I'm inferencing that line, taking it down there, okay. What I'm then going to do is just create that curved section at the bottom there like that, and do the same on this side. So where that point comes down, it comes down to about here, and bring that bulge point out, and then just drawing my bulge section there, okay. So that creates the kind of rounded rectangle section that we've created for the outside of the box. So it's taking into account these rounded edges, very slight though they are, the rounded edges there, okay. Now we can see that this is fairly flat on the top. It actually raises very slightly on the top, and then it goes to another sort of rounded cube shape, very small height extrusion there in the center. So what I'm going to do is decide again to subdivide this up. So I'd say it probably goes in around about this distance in. I'll draw my first line there, okay, parallel with that edge again, and where it touches these points where I've subdivided the part up already like this, I'm going to draw another cube. So notice I'm using these parallel lines to make them in line with these edges here, okay. So that section there is just here, and it's got a very slight extrusion, so I'm just going to bring a small line up like this, and again use that to slightly raise this section up. So I'm creating a very small extruded cube on top, of the existing cube, which is obviously the base. So there we go, we can see that there. As we said, this is slightly rounded as well, just on those edges. It's got a slight bulge, so we could go through the same sort of process to get this kind of refined in the same way. I'm going to do this a little bit more freehand, a little bit more by eye. So I'm going to just put a very slight curved bulge on each of these sides, trying to keep it consistent from all of the edges there, starting and finishing on the edges of each of these kind of sections that was brought out like that. So there we go, we've got a slight bulge produced on the top. Now what I'm also noticing here is obviously the thicker section of the glass here, the solid glass base is quite apparent. So what I might do is just draw a section here to divide off that block, again trying to stay in parallel with the line at the bottom, to demonstrate the bottom of this glass ball there is actually a solid kind of base inside the existing outer shell, if you like. So that is kind of where this pops up, and you can see if we look closely at this side of the product, it kind of comes in a little bit here. So we've effectively got like a rounded extrusion that's going up at a very slight angle from the bottom there. So within this point, okay, again we could subdivide this up, this inner section here, so we can find out where the middle of the shape is like this, and I'm going to draw myself a very slightly smaller cube inside, and what this does is indicating the outer wall thickness of the glass vial effectively that holds the liquid. And you can see, as I say, if we hold it up kind of like this, it just goes up at a very slight angle to the top, and we can see some of this detail inside. Again, it's that top thickness of the wall thickness of the glass there. So as opposed to going up straight where this comes to the top like this, we're going to come up at a very slight angle like this to close where the top of the product is, and the same on this side. So it's coming up like that. Again, this is slightly rounded at the bottom, so I'm rounding off that section. So what we're creating there is like an inner section which demonstrates the thickness there of the glass base of the wall there, and obviously the top. So we've got the bottom of the glass section kind of worked out now. It's just a case of drawing this cylinder. In fact, it's very slightly tapered towards the top, but a cylinder on the top. Now if we just look at a rough measurement of this, we can see that both the glass section there and the actual cylinder on top are very, very close to being exactly the same measurements. So what I'm going to do is take that measurement there and then transfer it straight away to here. So we get that same sort of size there. Again, you could use rulers and things. I'm doing this a little bit more my eye and by sort of practice with my hand, which is a good way to kind of do this if we're kind of sketching. We're trying to do some quick sketches. I'm just drawing those lines up, and as I said, that measurement there is very similar to this measurement here. I just kind of done that by eye, so I can put a point there on the top like that, and we have effectively, we'll start this off as a cuboid again like we did with the other one, and we'll modify it to a cylindrical shape at a later point. I think I'm going to slightly run out of paper here, so I might have to adjust the proportion very slightly. I want to just about fit on the paper there, which is handy. Okay, but there we go, we've got that kind of cylinder on the top there, going from the top. Now as we said, this is a cylinder, so at the bottom it will be a circle. Now you can see what we done earlier on is we divided this up, so we're going to divide that square up and make that very clear. So I should get 4, in fact 8 distinct sections on the point. Now going through that centre point there, there's our centre of our circle. What we're going to do is we're going to have a cylinder that's going to be drawn, or sorry, an ellipse that's going to be drawn from this point here. It's going to go through a point about 2/3 of the way up the line, and then it's going to come to our next edge of that corner there. I'm going to repeat that process for the other one. So again, I'm looking for a point about 2/3 of the way to get my bulge kind of correct to draw that cylinder there. Sorry, that ellipse there, and the same on the other side. So where that bulge is there, it will be transferred to the same point on the other side. Drawing that bulge round like this. Okay, and then finally completing my cylinder, again looking at where that bulge is to inference the measurement to the other side like this, and there we have our cylinder. Okay, now that same central point should be the same centre on the top here, so we'll do the same process again, and we'll subdivide this up. Notice I'm using these parallel lines from the edges like this. I'm using this parallel line to go through the shape like that. Okay, so there we've got our shape on the top. Now what we're going to do here this time is make a slightly smaller circular shape to indicate that taper. So we're going around the edges like this, parallel with the edge to make a slightly smaller shape like this, and then we're going to repeat the same points. We're using that 2/3 bulge point on the line like this to kind of get the centre of our ellipses, so we can construct our ellipses fairly accurately like this. Doing the same all the way around. Notice I can inference the points from one to the other like this as I'm going. There we go, all the way around the shape like this. And then now it's just a simple case of taking the edge of our cylinder that we can see, which is probably going to be this furthest point here and the furthest point here, and connecting those up with the equivalent point on the top. So this will give us that accurate taper from the bottom there to the top of the product. Notice it's around about that bulge point there where it starts to disappear around the shape. So there we go, we've got a fairly accurate, I think I've completely overemphasized that bulge. I'd actually, it's a much lesser degree that it goes up, but we've got a fairly accurate interpretation of that. So that's how I'd probably go about constructing the shape. Now I'm just going to go around this a little bit more with a little bit of line weight, so we can probably see this a little bit clearer on the actual shape. As you can see, I've definitely overemphasized that the bulge and the taper on the top of the glass section, but the construction method is still quite good there. I'm quite pleased with the rest of it, and it would just be a slight amendment required in order to make that a little bit more accurate. Okay, so it's worth kind of improving your designs and kind of making these changes to make sure that they're really accurate. But the process there in terms of construction of the object is pretty good. I'm just going to emphasise that inner section a little bit better as well to show that wall thickness. There we go, and there we have it. We've got our first design. Now what I'd obviously do is go over this probably in pen. I might apply some rendering or shading or something like this, but there we go, as our first drawing of the day just there.